So you're building yourself a video editing PC, perhaps in Premiere Pro, and you're wondering which one is the best GPU for you. I have tested all the latest from Nvidia, AMD, and Intel. I've got some very interesting and surprising results for you. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what's the best GPUs for Premiere Pro, and whichever one you're planning to get, there's some benchmarks for you in this video. So let's go. Super excited to announce that this video is sponsored by Artlist, something that we've been using for years, and now they're sponsoring this video. So check them out in the video description below, or more about them later on in this video. So first, what you've seen on the screen is a whole lot of benchmarks, all the different GPUs tested, and as you can see, there's quite a few of them over there. And some of them I have even multiple GPUs from like the same kind of brand, like two 4090s. So you can see if there's any difference in brands as well. Now, this score here doesn't exactly tell you the whole picture, and you'll see that in a minute. But what you can see here is generally just everything laid out. So if you want to dive deeper into straight away, feel free to pause it and you can look a little bit in here. Firstly, I'm going to leave all my test bench setup in the description below if you want to check out how I tested and what this is. And I have tested a previous version of Premiere Pro because I don't have all of the GPUs in there. Some of the 30 series we don't have anymore, but to kind of still pull them into the benchmarks, I need to create a benchmark solution where we can still test some of the newer cards, but perhaps in the older version of the software, which actually comes with a little bit of a caveat or a cost. For example, the Intel Arc. What has happened is that since the Arc was launched, they have gained pretty much 50% in performance, the first driver and the latest driver. And a lot of the softwares have, in the newer versions, implemented hardware acceleration or full optimization of the Arc GPU. In order to actually see how much is the Arc better in the new version of the program, here's what I did. I did a test with Premiere Pro 23.6, which doesn't support the media engines inside the actual GPU. And then I did another test with Premiere Pro 24.2, which does support the hardware acceleration or the hardware utilization of the media engines inside the GPU and everything there. So firstly, those results are very interesting. You can see extended and standard overall scores were gaining about 10 to 11% just because of moving the software. Bear in mind, I'm using the latest driver that's available in February 2024. If you dive a little bit deeper in there, you can see that the Intraframe and RAW scores, they don't change much. RAW is a little bit faster in the newer one, about 6 to 7%, so definitely better utilizing RAW. The GPU effects is within 2%, so I'm gonna have to disregard that difference in those two softwares. But if you're looking at the difference between LongGOP, which means H.264 and 5 codecs, you can see there is a huge difference between the two versions of software, 37 to 42% difference, which just shows that if you are using Arc GPUs or plan to use it, go with the latest driver and latest software. You can see there is about 30-40% difference in LongGOP and about 10 to 11% difference in overall scores. Now, knowing these percentages now, you can apply them to the rest of the graphs if you want to know what the Arc would be like with the latest software. Now, the other Nvidia and AMD, I don't see any difference between the newer and older softwares as much, so we're gonna just take that out of the equation. But if you want to see a real, how much Arc would improve with the newer software, you can add 10% in the overall scores or about 37 to 42% in the LongGOP scores. Now, firstly, let's take a look at the extended overall score. And here we can see that the Nvidia is leading the pack. You can see the 4090 is right on the top there. Interestingly, the Radeon RX 7900 XT is quite close to the top there, and in extended scores, not that much of a difference. So the top back, roughly 4090s and 7900 XTX are slightly faster there, a few percent than the 7900 XT, and 4080 and 4080 Super, they roughly perform about the same. Then we've got the other third pack that comes from about 4070 Ti Super, we've got 3090 Ti in there as well, and then that goes all the way down to roughly about RTX 4070. There's another like few 5% there. Then there's a big jump between the 8GB and 12GB cards. As you can see there, there's a big jump that just shows that the benchmark uses a little bit more than 8GB of VRAM, and you can see the difference in there. even though we've got the Supreme X that performs roughly about the same as A580 there, or 4060 Ti. Interestingly, 4060 Ti still has 16 gigabytes, but they're roughly all about the same in there. And then slowly we have got the bottom pack of the GPUs there. Now bear in mind, if you took the ARC cards, you can add extra 10% in there, and then they would perform roughly in the middle of the pack, somewhere over there, just below the 4070 and 7700 XT, which is just very interesting in the extended overall scores. But that's a combination of codecs, and then we've got the standard overall score here as well. Interestingly, here now, NVIDIA is not on top of the pack. Even the 7900 XT and the 7800 XT are better than the 4090. So NVIDIA is not leading the race in there. In fact, the 7900 XT and 7900 XTX are quite a bit faster than the 4090, roughly about 7% in the overall score standard, which is very interesting. You can see like a top pack there between the 4070 Ti to all the way 7800 XT. That's like one pack of GPUs there. Then we've got that, I would call it top range. Then we've got the mid range from about A580 and 4070 to the 7700 XT. They're like the middle pack, and then we've got the lower pack, which is 7600 XT and lower in the standard overall scores. But in terms of BudgetBench, we've got to know like which codecs does it actually utilize to do these tests. So you can see different codecs that they're testing, and the ones with a star in the end of them, they are the extended preset, and then the rest of them are standard preset. So you can see in the extended, we're also testing 4K H.265 422 10-bit, which is quite hard for most of their cards, but Intel Arc, for example, or iGPU can decode that codec hardware accelerated compared to the NVIDIA or AMD. We've got a few more raw codecs there as well, high resolution, and Sony Ari and Cinema Raw, as you can see there. When you're choosing the GPU for your Premiere Pro, if you're doing a mixture of a lot of these codecs in your workflow, then perhaps looking at the standard overall or extended overall is the best chart for you. But if most what you're doing is working with mirrorless camera codecs, that means H.264 and 5, then this chart here is the most interesting one for you. I'm so buzzing to tell you more about today's video sponsor, ARTLIST, which is an all-in-one platform for your content creation needs. They offer music licensing and sound effects, but now also templates, stock footage, and plugins. ARTLIST got hundreds of thousands of songs and sound effects, so you don't need to pay for multiple licenses to satisfy your song needs. You can be pretty confident that you'll never run out of choice on ARTLIST. Also, by using ARTLIST, you are supporting other professional artists who actually create the professional music on the site for you to use, made by creators for creators. Their universal license makes sure that you'll never get hit by a copyright strike, whether this is on social media or a Super Bowl advert. ARTLIST is not just a music licensing site anymore. Use their AI-powered search engine to find the B-roll that you'd need or forgot to shoot. Or install the plugin directly to your editing software and access all the assets directly and faster. And choose a licensing that fits your needs. So whether you're a solo creator or an employer who has hundreds of employees, there is a license for you. No need to pay more than you actually need. And if you use my link in the video description below, you'll get 2 months for free. Check out ARTLIST and all that they can offer in the video description below. Thanks very much ARTLIST for sponsoring this video, and back to the video. So as you can see, we have the extended scores and standard overall scores. And very interestingly, AMD is absolutely leading the results here. But there is a but, which I'll get to in a minute. You can see the 4090 is about 22% slower than the 7900 XT. Interestingly, the 7900 XT and XTX perform roughly about the same in these LongGOP scores. They're within 0.5% of each other. So really, if you want an awesome card with 20 gigs of VRAM, the 7900 XT seems to be a great pick for you. So if you do want to pick any of these GPUs out, I'm going to leave the link in the description below where you can find them. In the bottom of the chart, you can see there is the A770. But if you add 40% of the performance, we're actually getting very, very interesting results. We would get roughly around a 4090 score, about 72, which means that if you get doing LongGOP or only that, the Arc is actually absolutely insane bang for buck GPU for that. It's even cheaper than the 7600 XT that performs even better there, extra 8% better in the LongGOP, and the encoder is absolutely awesome. Now, if you're looking at the actual charts, there's quite a big difference between Nvidia and Intel, and then boom, the AMD ones. AMD is absolutely leading the pack in LongGOP, so they are doing insane performance with the media engines. Bear in mind, a lot of them have dual media engines as well. But there is a big but with AMD encoders and decoders. They have a lower quality than Nvidia and Intel. I highly recommend checking out some of the streaming codec, for example, comparisons between different encoders, Nvidia, AMD, and Intel. Epos Vox has done a very great comparison between the different codec kind of quality, and you can see that AMD is not particularly the best, which means that if you do use AMD cards for Premiere Pro, then I highly recommend increasing the bit rate of the final export when you're doing that, because then you're kind of complementing your encoder quality and trying to raise the quality when you're exporting. But at the same time, that would lose the performance in there, which kind of makes the AMD cards a little bit of a question mark. Yes, they are best in the charts, but just because of the encoder quality, which is very hard to actually test with just, you know, exporting 3 videos with different cards and then putting them all to 40 megabits per second, for example, seeing the results, your eye wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And if that is not important to you, AMD cards are the one to go for you. If you care about the export quality, I highly recommend increasing your bit rate, what is recommended usually on any of the exports, what you're doing, just to get the equivalent quality for AMD, Intel, and Nvidia. Now, I've been speaking to Matt Bark from TESTBENCH, and I was asking like, okay, what do you think, what is the, you know, best encoders, worst encoders, what do you see? And you know, obviously he mentioned as well that AMD encoders are not as good in terms of quality, but very, very performance and fast, if that makes sense. And he said that he would probably rank Intel first, Nvidia second, and then AMD third, which is very, very interesting. And that makes the A770 for this LongGOP scores absolutely amazing budget GPU. And really, why would you buy the RTX 4090 for many times more than this card? Is pretty much exactly the same in any of these results. I'm gonna leave this Arc in the description below. Bear in mind, you don't have to buy this Predator version. You can also buy it in the Sparkle Titan version, which is really nice blue card. Moving on to Intraframe Score, and I highly recommend checking out the CPU comparison for Premiere Pro. What is the best CPU for Premiere Pro? Because there I'll explain what is the difference between LongGOP, Intraframe, and RAW. So if you're not familiar what codecs you're actually using in your workflow and what does it actually mean, because your codec might be, or you're looking at the video file and it might say MP4. Which one is this? I'll explain it all in the previous video, so highly recommend checking that one out. Now, Intraframe here, the results are, again, very interesting, okay? We've got the Arc A580, which is right on top of the chart, the best card for this, which is absolutely insane. And bear in mind, the A580 is using slightly newer driver, because when I tested the A580, and that's the latest kind of Intel card that has come out yet, that has the latest driver, which means they're right on the top there, which makes me able to speculate that the A770 would be right on the top there next to the A580, because it's even more powerful card. And same with the A750, they would be right in there. So if you're doing Intraframe scores, them cards are one of the best ones to get in terms of money. It's very hard to beat, and you can see buying a 7900 XTX or RTX 4090 is really not gonna make that much of a difference, if you know what I mean. But basically the mid-range and low range, they all perform the same, roughly from around 4080 all the way down to 4060. As you can see, anything that's in between are very, very similar. Then there is the top pack, which is the A750, as you can see, is between kind of 7700 XT and 4080. But if it had the newer driver, it might have performed even better, right on top of the charts. So the Intel cards are interesting, the best for Intraframe scores. or Intraframe codecs. Then comes AMD and then Nvidia, but again, AMD with their encoder quality, that makes me question it a little bit. I've also added the extended and standard side by side, just in case you're using one or the other more. You could see which cards are the best for you and which cards perform better. Moving on to the raw score. So this is TESTBENCH 0.98 and we've got extended and standard side by side. Now, this is interesting here. If you're looking at the extended scores, the Nvidia cards are the absolute best. So when you're using raw or working with raw files, the Nvidia cards are right on top of the charts. As you can see, there is absolutely no comparison. The 7900 XTX is actually slower than the 4070 Super, and the 4070, both of them. So that's not very impressive. So that's the extended scores when we're talking about some of the cinema raw codecs from Sony cameras or Arri cameras or something like that. But in the standard codecs, bear in mind, if you do want to check out which are standard and extended, codecs that they're testing, I mentioned it previously, or I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to check that one out as well. But again, the Arc is right on top there with 69.3 scores, a bit better than any of the AMD cards, a bit better than any of the Nvidia cards, which is absolutely insane. But if you're looking at the standard score, there is not that big of a difference between the best and the worst card. As you can see, an RTX 3050 and the absolute best card, there is roughly about 6% difference, which is not that big at all. Moving on to GPU effects in Premiere Pro, and I've got the standard and extended side by side, so you can again compare these two here. So we can see that Nvidia cards are so much better than anything else. In fact, the 4090 is about 5% faster than the 4080, and you can see 4080 and 4070 Ti, there is quite a big difference in there. Like there's two top packs kind of. The 4090 is on another level, and then we've got 4080s and 4070 Ti Supers in there that are a little bit lower than the 4080. So 4080 is another league, then 4070 Ti Super. And then we kind of gently going all the way down to 4070 and all the AMD cards in there, like the midfield, and then the lower end pack in there. The AMD cards aren't particularly good in the GPU effects. And then the same about Arc, we're roughly in the lower end of the pack there. Interestingly, about the same as 4060 Ti, slightly faster, and then 7700 XT and 3060 and so on. So impressive in that lower budget end field, because you got to remember the price for this is absolutely insane. Less than $300 you can pay for this, which is really mental. But then we've got the middle of the AMD cards there. You might be thinking you're using a lot of GPU effects. Actually, Premiere Pro is not GPU very heavy on the GPU effects. Even the worst of the effects in there don't fully saturate the lowest end of the GPUs, like a 3050. So in order to actually showcase the difference between these GPUs, this benchmark actually puts 40 plus of these effects on top of each other so you could see it. So any of the effects that are GPU accelerated, there's 40 of them on top of each other so you can actually see the difference, which is not really a real world scenario. And I think the GPU effects you really don't need to worry about this really here. Any of the other codecs are much more important for you. Now, you think this is the end, but there is one very important thing that we have to talk about, which is VRAM. And that might be the number one thing that might bottleneck your system or your PC when using different codecs and working with them. That being said, this A770 becomes very interesting because this guy has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and you can get it roughly around $300, which is cheaper than the 7600 XT, which also has 16 gigabytes. But actually, in terms of the encoder quality and so on, I'm kind of choosing this A770 instead. In comparison, us editing these videos here, which is multicam of 6K, 4K and 4K footage in there, and then on top of that we've got other B-roll and other bits, and it can get quite complicated. We can see that we're peaking around 18 gigabytes of VRAM used. So in your workflow, if you are serious about video editing and you're doing complex timelines and so on, I highly recommend getting more than 8 GB of VRAM in any of these cards. Now, getting 12 to 16 is very, very good, and for most people that is absolute maximum they need. But those who really need video editing at the absolute maximum, very complex timelines, the 4090 and the 17900 XT and XTX are the cards that have more than 16 GB. So again, the very high-end professionals, the RTX 4090 and NVIDIA are the best, but for most people, the budget GPU that kind of sticks out from all of these charts for me is the Arc A770 and the Intel cards, because they're so affordable and the encoder quality just gives you the peace of mind. And the future of Arc is going to be great, I am sure of this, just because they're already so heavily invested in their QuickSync features, and can't wait to see what they're going to do with the next generation of GPUs. So it's absolutely fantastic to me. The awesome thing about these cards, or building yourself the best PC, is that you can choose the design of the GPU, whichever one you want. We've got some ProArt GPUs that are absolutely gorgeous. One of the best looking GPUs that I have ever seen. Also, another very interesting one to check out is the MSI Expert RTX 4080 Super, which looks so beautiful as well. One of the things that this ProArt is different from any of the other ones is that when you buy the ProArt GPU, you get actually 3 months off your Creative Cloud membership or free membership. So you can count that off the price, which might make some of these more affordable than any of the competition, because you're already using Premiere Pro, and if you're paying for the license, you can get this off, which is a nice discount to have. And if ASUS is still running the deal, then any of the ASUS cards you're getting, you can still get 1 month for free Creative Cloud membership, which might be worth considering ASUS ones over the other brands out there. As always, all the links for everything that I talked about are in the description below if you want to pick anything out. And if you want to build yourself the best bang for buck creator PC, then there's build guides in the description below as well. Whatever your budget is, there it is. And if you're using Premiere Pro, I highly recommend the GPU part of that build. Then pick the results from this video and pick which one is the best for you. I want to say big thanks to Artlist for sponsoring this video, so go check them out in the video description below. If you use my links, you get 2 months for free on any of the plans. And it's great to see a brand that you've been using for years now wanting to pair up with us to actually provide some more content for you guys. So super grateful for Artlist, and definitely worth checking them out. They've got an awesome service, and now a lot more than just music licensing site down in the video description below. Thanks, Artlist.